Hey guys, it's Marie with Mason Jar Merchant. More in my normal habitat than usual. Hope you can hear over my dishwasher, which is behind the screen. I have made a big, huge batch of chili. One of the questions we got from you guys from the stories a couple days ago was, how do you freeze in jars? I know a lot of you have tried and failed. I've read it a lot on a lot of the zero waste groups, like, oh, you can't freeze in jars, it always cracks. You can freeze in jars, and it's easy. You just have to know what jars to use and how to properly thaw them. Those are the two biggest hurdles that you'll have. So I'm going to bring in the chili, and I'm going to bring in all the jars that I used to pack it away, and then we'll get started. When I say giant pot, I'm not kidding. This guy has 16 quarts, and it's not all the way full, but it's within about an inch of being full. I don't know if you can see how full this is. If I tip it, it's almost all the way full. We added, did all the chopping of everything last night and sauteing. So you'll need a couple of things aside from your, whatever you're putting in jars. You're going to want straight-sided jars. That's the first big tip. So the ones that I use for freezing are these guys. They are wide mouth pints, so 16 ounces, about 500 milliliters. They're a wide mouth as opposed to a regular. We can go more into that later. I use these because they're a really good serving size for us. We have 3 adults in the house. If you have children, you probably want to use little kids especially, you probably want to use a wide mouth half pint. Is this a pint, right? 16 ounces. This is a half pint. It's about 18 ounces, or 8 ounces, sorry. You can see that both of the jars have straight sides. They don't taper from the body to the lid to mouth size. So what that means is when your liquid or your soup or your stew freezes and it expands straight up. It may go out a tiny bit, but not enough to crack the jar because it has room to go up. So a few sizes you can use to freeze are the ones that I've shown you already: a wide mouth pint, a wide mouth half pint. This is a wide mouth pint and a half. We use a lot of these for our drinking jars because they fit in cup holders. So that's 24 ounces or 750 ml, same as a wine bottle. This is a regular mouth half pint. So this is also 8 ounces. This is what you typically see as a jelly jar, but it's got straight, if not slightly tapered sides. The sides go in a little bit, that's okay. And then we have the regular mouth quarter pint, which is 4 ounces. So really good for baby food, small things, concentrated stock, or just some things you need a little bit of and you want to freeze. Those are great. There's also, we don't really use these, but I have a couple of them, so I thought I would show you. These are WEC jars. I don't know if you can see there. WEC jars, they have glass lids, they have rubber seals that go under, and little clips that clip on the top. They're not as practical because there's a lot of sizes, but we have a few kicking around, and they would be okay too because, again, the jar is tapered open to the top and the bottom. So that your frozen liquid would have room. The kinds of jars that you don't want to use, which is a lot of what people have around, are just your standard visible, like you're looking at, like, yeah, that's a standard mason jar. This is a regular mouth pint, so same volume as the one we're going to be packing in, but the regular mouth. This is a wide mouth quart. You can see both. The body is wider than the mouth. So what that means is you can either freeze just a little bit to where it has room to go up, or if you fill it, when it starts to freeze, there's nowhere to go, and so it's going to crack your jar. Sometimes the cracks aren't visible until you start thawing, and there's nothing worse than thinking you have food or formula or breast milk or whatever, and you start thawing it and realize it's broken and you have to toss it out. So you don't want to use any jar that's tapered, that has any, this is called a shoulder. The jar doesn't have any shoulder to it, just straight-sided jars, or jars that are tapered like this to the opening, and those will all freeze well. So that's a very important thing. The other thing is when you fill your jars, you want to give what's called headspace. This is also in canning. You always give room in canning, but in freezing you do too. So I always just fill to the rim. If I feel like it's really something really liquidy, I might give a little bit of extra room. I like to be safe rather than sorry. So if you give anywhere from 3/4 inch to an inch of headroom, then when these freeze, it will expand upwards, not out, and you're going to be good to go. I always leave the lids slightly loose, like I don't screw the rings on quite tight when they're freezing. That way it has room for the air to escape, and then once they're frozen, and especially before I thaw them, I make sure the rings are sealed. So in order to put your food liquid in jars, you need a canning funnel. You could probably make one out of a few things you have lying around. I have one out of metal. They make them out of silicone that pops up and down, but it really helps getting the food in the jar without making a big mess. So it's not essential, but it will save you a lot of time if you're doing this often. So I'm going to start just filling all my jars, and you can watch. I usually keep I don't know how you can see this here. Let's see. I usually keep the jar with the funnel close to the pot. I'm pretty messy in the kitchen, but I try not to be. I am, but I try not to be. So you're just gonna spoon or pour whatever's going into your jars. And if you overfill, it's fine. Just grab a spoon or a small ladle and scoop out enough to where you have that headroom that I was talking about. So I think you can see here, this is chili. It's quite thick, so I'm not too worried about the expanding too much. So we've got a couple lumps of tomato and pepper that are sticking up over that boundary, but I'm not worried about that. So that's a good fill for our single serving, basically, jar. It does take a little bit of time to, prep to make this much food, and then it takes a little bit of time to pack it away, but overall it takes way less time than making this meal over and over again. So if you're busy, you just don't like to cook every single day, look at those things, or if I'm going to cook something new, I might want to make a new keto baking recipe or something instead of just dinner. This is anytime you can batch process stuff, it's going to be a quicker way to do it overall, even if it is a bigger investment in time on the front end. So this recipe, in case you're wondering, how do you make this much chili in one go? You have to have a big enough pot. This is a 16-quart Salad Master. I don't know what the official name of it is. Stock pot, maybe. Salad Master is titanium stainless steel. It was a huge investment for us financially several years ago, but we'll never have to buy new pans, pots, so it was well worth it. And it works for me to cook all these big batches. If you have a big stock pot, you can use that. Cheaper pots tend to burn on the bottom easier, so depending on how much you're cooking, you really want to watch and make sure that it's not going to burn on the bottom, because that will affect the taste of your whole batch, even if you scrape that off the bottom. So you might have to be a little more careful, but just cook. Just go slow and careful, especially when it's big things, big batches like this. I used to cook for a friend of mine who has a lot of kids, and they were really busy, and so I did some batch cooking for her. And one day I was making a batch of broccoli cheddar soup, and I didn't have this pan yet. I think it was even bigger than this one. And I had it cooking on the stove, simmering away. It was really very close to done, if not done. And I went to get a cup out of the cupboard, and I dropped it on the counter, and the soup didn't have a lid on it, so the whole batch had to go down the garbage disposal. It was very disappointing. So be careful. Make sure that you're adding the right ingredients and tasting as you go. You don't want anything that's too sour or too salty or too spicy. Okay, so this is all the clean jars I have right now. I have more in the dishwasher, but they're not going to be done for a while. This is about half of the pot, I think. So if you divide this in threes, like usually one per person, unless we're extra hungry and not having any side dishes at all. Like last night, we had chili because I made it, and made keto garlic biscuits. They were amazing. My mother-in-law said, let's just skip the chili and eat the biscuits. They were that good. I'll try to post the recipe. So if we divide by threes for us, this, like, well, I guess individual meals, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14. So let's say I'm half, so that's, to 30 is 15. 30 individual meals from 1 3-hour session of cooking. I'll go through the recipe too. I was going to do that, I forgot. Put this over here. So now that we've got our jars filled, you need these things too. Those are mason jar lids. Two other essential parts to mason jars: lids and bands. I have a random assortment of both hanging around because we have so many jars around here. But you're going to want to close that, and just loosely. You really don't want it to be super tight before you put it in the freezer. The other thing you want to do is label your food. So I have a whole bunch of these that have little chalkboard labels on them. We sell these in the store. If you have a craft cutter, you can do your own. You can also write on the top of the metal mason jar lid with a Sharpie, like a permanent marker. And when you're ready, when you're done with that lid, rubbing alcohol will take the Sharpie off. It might leave a little bit of an indent, like a kind of a ghost where you can see what you wrote a little bit, but you can use it. You can definitely use them over and over again. You don't really use used lids. You can use rings for canning, but freezing, you can reuse them over and over. The same for fridge storage. So I'm gonna, with mine, I have the chalkboard labels. And I went and I bought these at the craft store a couple years ago. This is a pastel chalk pencil, so it's like a color pencil, as Americans would say, pencil crayon, as Canadians would say. And it's a little bit different consistency than just regular chalk. It's a little bit more waxy, so it stays on better. But it's in pencil format, so you can write more stuff little. It's hard to write little with regular chalk. So these came in a pack of 2 for like $6. I would definitely recommend those if you're going to be writing on your jars, your chalkboard tops in chalk. As far as the recipe goes, it was 3 pounds of organic, like grass-fed ground beef. I can't write and talk at the same time. 3 pounds of lean ground beef, 3 big yellow onions, 6 or 7 various bell peppers, maybe 8, a handful of carrots that we had in the fridge, and everything is diced small. Carrots, some parsnip, which is an unusual addition, but we like our vegetables, so we added that. Zucchini, chopped up. What else? Sweet potato, 3 small sweet potatoes chopped up. What else is in the recipe? Your standard, all your standard spices, and then some not so standard spices. I think that's it for veggies. I sweat everything with a little bit of olive oil and salt, except for the zucchini and pepper. I added those later. But all the onion, sweet potato, parsnip, all of that was all cooked initially in the pot together before I added any tomatoes or anything like that. Can't think. So yeah, cook all of the hardier veggies until they're somewhat soft, and then I added the spices first. So I add garlic powder, onion powder, or granulated, both. I added some dried onion flakes, chili powder, cumin, and then the ones you might not think to add that I really, really, really love are paprika or smoked paprika, cocoa, and cinnamon. So cocoa, I would add about the same amount as I did chili powder, just because we don't do a lot of spice for my mother-in-law. I don't measure much, so I just do it by taste, and if I add a little bit, and if I want more, I add more. And cinnamon, just a hair, just a little bit of cinnamon. I probably added maybe a teaspoon for 16 quarts, but it really does add a lot of depth of flavor. And you'll also find, if you're doing chilies or curries or soups or stews, once you freeze the food and then thaw it, it has way more flavor than it did when you first made it. It's really good. So I think that's all that went into it, aside from 6 cans of either diced or crushed tomatoes. I would have added tomato paste if we didn't have any, but I fed you already. And then we added one size of this, 1 pint of the pureed yams to thicken it up. The tomato paste would have also done that. And then we added the ground beef, stirred everything up, tasted it, tastes good. And we set it outside in the barbecue overnight to cool, because we didn't have that kind of room in our fridge. It's still quite cold outside, so that works. And okay, I'm putting it away this morning. So when you thaw your frozen food, you want to bring it out of the freezer and I usually do a sink of water, but you can do a bowl depending on how many you need. So I'll set my 3 jars in the sink and plug the sink, and then run cold water just up to the top of the jar, not over. And I will, at this point, make sure the ring is on tight, because if it's not, you'll have water coming into your jar likely. So put it in a sink of cold water for a few minutes, and then you can, before you drain it, after about 5 or 10 minutes, you can start to add some warm hot water. Check your lids again, screw them on even tighter. If they're tight, nothing's going to leak into them. And then once I add a little bit of warm water to the mix, I'll drain the sink, turn the tap to hot or warm depending on how quickly I need everything thawed. And then you don't need to wait till they're fully thawed to heat them up. You can, as soon as you can get them out of the jar, just as the little outside is thawed, then you're going to have this big cube of chili or curry or whatever that you can then throw in your pot, and it'll cook. From frozen, you do have to stir occasionally just to make sure it's you don't have a clump of frozen on top and then hot and burning on the bottom. But overall, you can microwave them too, I'm sure. Overall, it's way easier than cooking a whole other meal. I have an experiment. If somebody wants to try it, I don't have one. I'm not going to go buy one just to try it, but I'm wondering if you have a frozen lunch like this, you bring it to work. If you have a coffee, like something that heats coffee, I wonder if it'll heat it up for you by lunchtime. Just curiosity. You have to let me know if it works. You might have a frozen lunch. You may have a backup lunch or a microwave. So I think that's it for now. I'll probably remember something else later. I'll try to add it overdub to the video, and if you have any other questions, you can email me always at info@masonjarmerchant.com. You guys have a wonderful day.